In 2019, paleoanthropologist Rolf Quam stood in a soundproof laboratory at the Max Planck Institute, staring at a computer screen displaying the reconstructed vocal tract of a 50,000-year-old Neanderthal. For months, his team had been feeding cranial measurements, jaw dimensions, and throat cavity data into advanced AI modeling systems. They were attempting something that had never been done before, recreating the actual voice of an extinct human species. The computer had processed thousands of variables: vocal cord length, tongue position, nasal cavity resonance, all the anatomical features that determine how a voice sounds. When Quam hit play, what emerged from the speakers was 3 seconds of sound that changed everything we thought we understood about human communication. The voice was deep, guttural, unlike any modern human voice. But it wasn't the tone that disturbed everyone in the room. It was their reaction to it. Every person present experienced an immediate physiological response: elevated heart rate, heightened alertness, a fight-or-flight activation that seemed to come from nowhere. One researcher described it as hearing the voice of something that wanted to eat me. Another said it triggered childhood memories of being afraid of the dark. But here's what made their reactions genuinely unsettling. None of them had ever heard a Neanderthal voice before. None of them had any conscious association with that particular acoustic pattern. Yet their nervous systems recognized it instantly and responded with fear. Dr. Quam ran the experiment again with a larger group. 47 test subjects. No prior knowledge of what they were hearing. The results were consistent across every individual. Immediate stress response, increased cortisol levels, activation of brain regions associated with threat detection. But the most disturbing discovery came when they analyzed the specific frequency patterns of the Neanderthal voice. The sound contained acoustic signatures that modern human voices cannot produce. Frequencies that trigger neurological pathways in the human brain that modern speech never activates. Ancient pathways. Pathways that evolution carved into human neurology during hundreds of thousands of years of coexistence with Neanderthals. Think about what that means. For over 200,000 years, modern humans and Neanderthals shared the same landscapes. They competed for resources. They encountered each other in caves, at water sources, along migration routes. And during those encounters, the sound of Neanderthal voices became associated with danger, with competition, with threats that required immediate response. Over thousands of generations, human brains evolved to recognize Neanderthal vocal patterns as signals of potential conflict. That recognition became hardwired into human genetics, buried so deeply in our nervous systems that we respond to it instinctively, even 40,000 years after the last Neanderthal died. But here's where the research becomes genuinely disturbing. When Dr. Quam's team analyzed the specific acoustic features that trigger the fear response, they discovered something unexpected. The same frequencies appear in modern sounds that humans find instinctively unsettling. Horror movie soundtracks, alarm systems, warning signals. Sound designers have been unconsciously recreating elements of the Neanderthal voice for decades, because those frequencies tap into the same ancient fear pathways, the same evolutionary responses that kept our ancestors alive when they heard voices like this in the darkness. The psychological effects don't stop when the sound ends. Test subjects reported vivid dreams for weeks after hearing the reconstructed Neanderthal voice. Dreams of being hunted, of hiding in caves, of encounters with beings that looked almost human but weren't quite right, as if hearing that voice activated genetic memories that had been dormant for millennia, memories of a world where humans weren't the only intelligent species, where meeting another group of hominins could mean competition for survival, where the sound of a voice could determine whether you lived or died. Dr. Quam has refused to release the audio publicly. The research team agreed that the psychological impact was too significant, too unpredictable, too likely to cause distress in individuals who heard it without proper preparation. But the voice exists, locked in digital files. The first extinct human voice ever recreated with scientific accuracy. And according to everyone who has heard it, it sounds like something that should never speak again. The Neanderthal voice is a reminder that for most of human evolutionary history, we weren't alone. We shared the world with other intelligent species whose voices carried messages we were evolutionarily programmed to fear. And somewhere in the deepest levels of your nervous system, you're still listening for them, still ready to run when you hear them speak. In 2021, paleoacoustic researcher Dr. Julia Clark received a package at the University of Texas that would allow her to recreate the most terrifying sound in Ice Age North America. Inside the package was a fossilized hyoid bone, the throat bone of Arctodus simus. The short-faced bear, the largest terrestrial predator that ever lived in North America. 12 feet tall when standing upright, 2,000 pounds of muscle and bone and teeth designed for killing things the size of mastodons. But it wasn't the bear's size that made it the apex predator of the Pleistocene. It was the sound it made. Dr. Clark had spent years developing techniques for reconstructing the vocalizations of extinct animals. Her method involved creating detailed computer models of vocal tract anatomy, then using acoustic physics to calculate how air would move through those structures. She had successfully recreated the calls of extinct birds, the trumpeting of extinct elephants, the howls of extinct wolves. But the short-faced bear presented challenges unlike anything she had attempted before. The hyoid bone was massive, nearly twice the size of a modern grizzly bear's throat bone, which meant the vocal cords would have been proportionally larger, capable of producing sounds at frequencies and volumes that no modern animal can achieve. When the computer modeling was complete, Dr. Clark hesitated before running the acoustic simulation. The calculated volume exceeded the safety thresholds of her laboratory equipment. The reconstructed roar would have reached 120 decibels at a distance of 100 meters. That's loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage. Loud enough to trigger avalanches. Loud enough to be heard clearly at distances of over 50 kilometers. In the silence of the Ice Age landscape, a single short-faced bear roar would have been audible across an area the size of Rhode Island. But volume wasn't the most disturbing aspect of the reconstructed sound. It was the frequency. The short-faced bear roar contained infrasonic components, sounds below the threshold of human hearing. Frequencies that travel for enormous distances without significant attenuation. Frequencies that can cause disorientation, nausea, and panic in humans and other mammals. Frequencies that modern humans associate with natural disasters. Earthquakes, avalanches, storms. The kind of sounds that trigger immediate evacuation responses. When Dr. Clark finally played the reconstructed roar, she understood why short-faced bears had no natural predators. The sound didn't just announce their presence. It cleared the landscape. Every animal within hearing distance would have known instantly that something was approaching that could kill anything it encountered. And the smart response was to run, immediately, as far as possible. The acoustic modeling suggests that short-faced bear roars were so effective at territorial control that individual bears could maintain hunting territories spanning thousands of square kilometers, larger than some modern countries, simply by making noise. But here's what makes the short-faced bear roar genuinely terrifying for modern humans. Your ancestors heard that sound. For over 800,000 years, human populations in North America lived alongside short-faced bears. And for 800,000 years, hearing that roar meant one thing: find shelter immediately or die. The response became so deeply ingrained in human genetics that traces of it still exist in modern human neurology. Studies show that when humans hear infrasonic frequencies similar to those in the bear's roar, they experience immediate stress responses. Elevated cortisol, increased heart rate, activation of brain regions associated with life-threatening danger. The archaeological record supports the acoustic dominance theory. Human settlement patterns during the Ice Age show clear correlations with short-faced bear population distributions. Where bears were common, human sites are rare. Where bears were absent, human populations flourished. It wasn't just that humans avoided areas with dangerous predators. It's that they couldn't survive in areas where the acoustic environment was dominated by sounds that triggered constant stress responses. The bear's roar was so psychologically overwhelming that it made entire regions uninhabitable for human populations. Dr. Clark's research suggests that the extinction of the short-faced bear 11,000 years ago fundamentally changed the acoustic landscape of North America. For the first time in nearly 1,000,000 years, humans could occupy vast territories without the constant threat announced by that massive roar. The silence left behind by the bear's extinction may have been one of the factors that allowed human civilizations to develop in North America. Because civilization requires psychological stability, and psychological stability is difficult to maintain when the environment contains sounds that evolution programmed you to interpret as immediate mortal danger. The short-faced bear roar remains locked in Dr. Clark's research files. Too dangerous for public release. Too likely to cause panic or psychological trauma in individuals who hear it without preparation. But the sound exists. A perfect acoustic reconstruction of the most terrifying predator call in human evolutionary history. And according to everyone who has heard it, the reaction is always the same: an overwhelming urge to run. Even though the thing making that sound has been extinct for 11,000 years. The short-faced bear roar is a reminder that for most of human existence, the acoustic environment contained sounds that could kill you, just by triggering the wrong response. Sounds that shaped human behavior so completely that we still carry the neurological scars, still feel the ancient fear when we hear echoes of those prehistoric warnings, still run, even when there's nothing left to run from. In 2020, graduate student Maria Santos was digitally reconstructing the skull of Titanus walleri when she noticed something that didn't make sense. The inner ear structure was massive, disproportionately large compared to any modern bird. Titanus was a terror bird, 10 feet tall, 300 pounds, a flightless predator with a beak designed for crushing skulls and tearing flesh. The apex predator of Pliocene South America. But Santos wasn't studying Titanus for its hunting abilities. She was studying it for its voice. Because the oversized inner ear suggested that terror birds were capable of producing and processing sounds at volumes and frequencies that no modern bird can achieve. Working with paleoacoustic researchers at the Universidad Nacional de La Plata, Santos began the complex process of reconstructing the Titanus vocal tract. Terror birds belonged to a family called Phorushacidae. Their skulls were built like acoustic amplifiers. Massive cranial cavities, reinforced bone structures, specialized air sacs connected to the respiratory system. All the anatomical features necessary for producing extremely loud vocalizations. But when the computer modeling was complete, the results were disturbing. The reconstructed Titanus shriek reached calculated volumes of 140 decibels. Louder than a jet engine. Loud enough to cause immediate hearing damage at close range. Loud enough to disorient and incapacitate prey species before physical contact. But volume was only part of the weapon. The frequency analysis revealed something even more disturbing. Terror bird shrieks contained harmonic patterns that triggered acute stress responses in mammalian nervous systems, frequencies that mammals evolved to associate with extreme danger, the kind of sounds that cause involuntary muscle contractions, paralysis, cardiac arrest. Terror birds weren't just using their voices to communicate. They were using them as acoustic weapons, stunning prey with sound before moving in for the kill. Dr. Santos tested the reconstructed terror bird shriek on laboratory mice. The results were immediate and disturbing. Mice exposed to the sound at moderate volumes experienced instant seizures, muscle spasms, complete motor function failure. Some subjects died from cardiac arrest, triggered by the acoustic shock. The terror bird shriek wasn't just loud. It was literally lethal. A sound weapon capable of killing small mammals through pure acoustic trauma. The implications for human evolution are genuinely terrifying. Human ancestors lived alongside terror birds in South America for over 60 million years. During that time, hearing a terror bird shriek meant immediate mortal danger. Not just the danger of being hunted, the danger of being paralyzed by sound and then eaten alive. The acoustic signature of terror bird vocalizations became so deeply associated with death that human nervous systems evolved specific responses to those frequency patterns. Responses that still exist in modern human neurology. When Dr. Santos played the reconstructed terror bird shriek for test subjects, the reactions were consistent. Immediate panic attacks, muscle contractions, involuntary defensive postures. One subject collapsed and had to be hospitalized for acute stress response. But here's what makes the responses genuinely disturbing. The test subjects had no conscious knowledge of what terror birds were. No cultural or educational association with the sound. Yet their nervous systems recognized it instantly and responded as if their lives were in immediate danger. The terror bird shriek contains acoustic elements that appear in modern sounds, designed to cause fear and distress. Air raid sirens, emergency alarms, horror movie soundtracks. Sound designers have been unconsciously recreating elements of terror bird vocalizations for decades. Because those frequencies tap into evolutionary fear responses that predate human civilization by millions of years. When you hear sounds that make your skin crawl, you're often hearing echoes of the terror bird shriek. Acoustic ghosts, from an era when being heard meant being hunted. But the most disturbing aspect of the terror bird research isn't the sound itself. It's the timing of their extinction. Terror birds survived until approximately 400,000 years ago. Recent enough that early modern humans would have encountered them. Recent enough that some human populations may have cultural memories of these creatures. Oral traditions about giant birds that could kill with their voices. Myths about monsters whose calls could stop your heart. Stories that we've dismissed as fantasy. Stories that may be genetic memories of actual acoustic predators. Dr. Santos has refused requests to release the terror bird shriek audio. The psychological and physiological effects are too severe, too unpredictable, too likely to cause serious harm in individuals who hear it without proper medical supervision. But the sound exists, locked in research databases. A perfect reconstruction of the most dangerous predator call in mammalian evolutionary history. And according to everyone who has heard it, the terror bird shriek sounds like death itself. The terror bird shriek is a reminder that for millions of years, the acoustic environment contained sounds that could kill you directly. Not by attracting predators, not by causing you to make mistakes, by stopping your heart, by paralyzing your muscles, by turning sound itself into a weapon. And somewhere in the deepest levels of your nervous system, you're still listening for that shriek, still ready to drop to the ground and play dead when you hear it. still carrying the genetic memory of a world where voices could kill. In 2022, marine paleoacoustician Dr. Elena Costas was studying great white shark vocalizations when she made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric ocean predators. Hidden in the acoustic data was evidence that megalodons weren't just massive sharks. They were sophisticated hunters that used echolocation, like whales, like dolphins, but at scales and volumes that would have dominated the entire marine acoustic environment. Dr. Costas had been analyzing the inner ear structures of modern great whites, trying to understand how they process sound underwater. When she compared those structures to fossilized megalodon ear bones, the differences were shocking. Megalodons possessed inner ear anatomy unlike any modern shark. Specialized chambers, acoustic processing structures, sound production mechanisms that were clearly designed for active echolocation. But here's what made the discovery genuinely terrifying: the scale of the equipment. A modern dolphin produces echolocation clicks at around 220 decibels, loud enough to stun fish at close range, loud enough to cause discomfort in human divers. But megalodons were 60 feet long and weighed 100 tons. Their echolocation organs were proportionally massive. When Dr. Costas ran the acoustic modeling, the results were disturbing. Megalodon echolocation clicks would have reached calculated volumes of 300 decibels. 300 decibels isn't just loud. It's a level of acoustic energy that can cause catastrophic tissue damage. At close range, a 300 decibel sound pulse can rupture organs, cause brain hemorrhages, kill outright through acoustic trauma. Megalodons weren't just using echolocation for navigation and hunting. They were using it as a weapon. A sonic cannon capable of stunning or killing prey animals at distances of several kilometers. The most powerful biological weapon ever to evolve on Earth. But the implications go far beyond prehistoric marine warfare. For over 15 million years, megalodons dominated the world's oceans. During that time, their echolocation pulses were a constant presence in the marine acoustic environment. 300 decibel sound bursts traveling for hundreds of kilometers underwater. Acoustic shockwaves that would have shaped the behavior of every marine animal on the planet, including the early whales and dolphins that were developing their own echolocation systems. Modern cetacean echolocation may be an evolutionary response to megalodon sonic dominance. A way to communicate and navigate in an ocean filled with predator sonar pulses. Dr. Costas used underwater speaker arrays to recreate megalodon echolocation at reduced volumes. Even at 1% of the calculated prehistoric intensity, the effects were immediate and disturbing. Fish within 100 meters of the speakers experienced disorientation and motor function failure. Marine mammals fled the area immediately. Some smaller fish died from acoustic shock. The sound wasn't just loud, it was physically overwhelming. An acoustic assault that modern marine life has no evolutionary preparation for, because nothing like it has existed for 3.6 million years. But here's what makes megalodon echolocation genuinely unsettling for humans. Modern humans evolved along coastlines. Our ancestors spent millions of years gathering shellfish, fishing in shallow waters, traveling by boat across prehistoric seas. During much of that time, megalodons were active in the same waters, and their echolocation pulses would have been audible from the surface. 300 decibel acoustic shock waves traveling upward from the deep ocean. Sounds that would have announced the presence of a predator capable of destroying any boat ever built. The psychological impact on early human populations would have been profound. Imagine standing on a beach and hearing a sound like thunder coming from beneath the water, knowing that something larger than a city bus was hunting in the depths below. Something that could track your boat with sonic pulses. Something that could kill you with sound alone if you got too close. The ocean would have been a place of constant terror. An acoustic nightmare where the water itself carried warnings of enormous predators. Marine archaeologists have found evidence that early human coastal settlements avoided certain areas during specific time periods. Areas where megalodon teeth are common in the fossil record. Areas where the seafloor geology would have amplified and focused megalodon echolocation. As if early humans learned to read the acoustic landscape, to recognize the sonic signatures that meant death was hunting nearby. To avoid waters where the sounds from below were too dangerous to ignore. Dr. Costas believes that human fear of deep water may be partially rooted in genetic memories of megalodon echolocation. The instinctive terror that many people feel when they can't see the bottom. The conviction that something enormous is moving in the darkness below. Those fears may not be irrational. They may be evolutionary echoes of a time when the deep ocean was filled with predators that could kill you with sound. Predators that announced their presence with acoustic shockwaves that traveled for hundreds of kilometers. Predators that turned the sea itself into a weapon. The reconstructed megalodon echolocation remains classified by marine research institutions. Too dangerous for public release. Too likely to cause panic among coastal populations. Too potentially harmful to modern marine ecosystems if played at full volume. But the sound exists. A perfect acoustic reconstruction of the most powerful biological weapon ever to evolve. And according to everyone who has heard it, the megalodon echolocation doesn't sound like any animal. It sounds like the ocean itself becoming angry. The megalodon echolocation is a reminder that for most of human evolutionary history, the sea was an acoustic battlefield. A place where sound could kill. Where the water carried warnings of predators so large they could destroy entire ecosystems. And somewhere in the deepest parts of your nervous system, you still remember those sounds. Still feel the ancient fear when the ocean makes noises that don't belong. Still know, without knowing why, that some things should stay in the deep. In 2018, paleontologist Dr. David Evans was 3D scanning the hollow crest of a Parasaurolophus skull when his computer detected something unexpected. The internal structure wasn't just a breathing apparatus. It was a musical instrument. A complex system of tubes, chambers, and resonating cavities that could produce sounds of extraordinary volume and complexity. Dr. Evans had discovered that one of the most common dinosaurs of the late Cretaceous was also one of the most sophisticated sound-producing organisms ever to exist. But when he attempted to recreate Parasaurolophus vocalizations, the results were disturbing. The sounds weren't just loud. They were architectural, acoustic structures that could reshape the physical environment. Parasaurolophus were hadrosaurs, duck-billed dinosaurs that lived in massive herds across late Cretaceous North America. Herds that sometimes numbered in the tens of thousands. Each individual possessed a hollow cranial crest containing acoustic chambers that functioned like a trombone. But Dr. Evans's reconstruction revealed that individual Parasaurolophus calls were only the beginning. When multiple animals vocalized simultaneously, their calls created harmonic interactions. Acoustic interference patterns that amplified the individual sounds into something far more powerful. A synchronized chorus that could reach calculated volumes exceeding 200 decibels. But volume wasn't the most disturbing aspect of the Parasaurolophus chorus. It was the frequency. The reconstructed calls contained powerful infrasonic components. Sounds below the threshold of human hearing that could travel for hundreds of kilometers without significant attenuation. Sounds that could penetrate solid rock. Sounds that could trigger seismic events. When Dr. Evans modeled the acoustic output of a full Parasaurolophus herd, The calculations suggested they were capable of generating localized earthquakes. Acoustic energy sufficient to destabilize geological formations. Sound waves powerful enough to change the landscape. The implications for late Cretaceous ecology are genuinely terrifying. Parasaurolophus herds weren't just making noise. They were engaging in acoustic terraforming, using coordinated vocalizations to modify their environment, to clear forests by triggering landslides, to redirect rivers by destabilizing banks, to create open feeding areas by literally shaking the vegetation to death. Sound as a geological force. Voice as a weapon of mass environmental destruction. Dr. Evans tested the reconstructed Parasaurolophus calls on geological samples from late Cretaceous formations. The results were immediate. Rock samples exposed to the sound waves showed stress fracturing, sediment layers separated, mineral structures destabilized. At full volume, the Parasaurolophus chorus could have caused catastrophic changes to the landscape within hours. Entire mountain faces collapsing, river valleys flooding, forest ecosystems disappearing under acoustic avalanches. But here's what makes the Parasaurolophus chorus genuinely unsettling for modern humans. The late Cretaceous was loud. Louder than anything in the modern world. The acoustic environment contained sounds that could literally reshape continents. And early mammals lived through all of it. Small, furry ancestors hiding in burrows while the world above them shook with dinosaur voices. Developing hearing systems capable of processing acoustic environments that no modern animal could survive. When Dr. Evans played the reconstructed Parasaurolophus chorus for test subjects, the reactions were consistent and disturbing. Immediate disorientation, nausea, panic responses. Several subjects reported feeling like the building was collapsing around them. Even at reduced volumes, the sound triggered deep-seated terror responses. As if human nervous systems retained some genetic memory of a time when voices could bring down mountains, when the wrong sound could bury you alive. The frequency analysis reveals why the chorus is so psychologically overwhelming. Human inner ears evolved in acoustic environments dominated by Parasaurolophus vocalizations. For millions of years, those sounds were associated with immediate environmental danger, with landscapes changing, with safe spaces becoming death traps, with the ground itself becoming unreliable. The chorus contains acoustic signatures that trigger geological fear responses in human neurology. Terror of earthquakes. Terror of landslides. Terror of the earth moving beneath your feet. Dr. Evans discovered that modern construction equipment produces harmonic patterns similar to those in the Parasaurolophus chorus. Jackhammers, pile drivers, heavy machinery operating in coordinated groups. The sounds that modern humans associate with construction and development. But in the late Cretaceous, those same acoustic patterns meant destruction. Environmental catastrophe. The approach of herd animals capable of leveling entire ecosystems with their voices. The Parasaurolophus chorus reconstruction remains locked in paleoacoustic research databases. Too dangerous for public release. Too likely to trigger panic or geological anxiety in large populations. Too potentially harmful if played at full volume near unstable geological formations. But the sound exists. A perfect reconstruction of the most powerful coordinated animal vocalization in Earth's history. And according to everyone who has heard it, the Parasaurolophus chorus doesn't sound like animals. It sounds like the planet itself screaming. The Parasaurolophus chorus is a reminder that for most of Earth's history, animal voices were geological forces. Sounds that could move mountains. Sounds that could reshape continents. Sounds that made the ground itself unreliable. And somewhere in your nervous system, You still remember what it feels like to live in a world where voices could bring down the sky. Still feel the ancient terror when the earth moves. Still know, without knowing why, that some sounds are too dangerous to hear. In 2023, aerospace engineer Dr. Robert Chen was studying the flight mechanics of Quetzalcoatlus northropi when he realized that reconstructing pterosaur flight would require modeling not just aerodynamics, but acoustics. Quetzalcoatlus was the largest flying animal ever to exist. 40-foot wingspan, 500 pounds, a flying predator the size of a small aircraft. But Dr. Chen's analysis revealed something disturbing. When Quetzalcoatlus flew, it didn't just move through the air. It dominated the entire acoustic environment. The sound of its wing beats was so powerful it could be used as a weapon. An aerial predator that announced its approach with acoustic signatures that triggered immediate panic in everything below. Dr. Chen used wind tunnel testing and computer fluid dynamics to reconstruct the aeroacoustic properties of Quetzalcoatlus flight. The results were unlike anything produced by modern flying animals. Each wing beat generated acoustic pulses, reaching calculated volumes of 180 decibels, louder than standing next to a jet engine. But volume was only part of the acoustic signature. The frequency pattern was equally disturbing. Quetzalcoatlus wing beats produced powerful low-frequency pulses, infrasonic booms that could travel for dozens of kilometers, sounds that modern humans associate with approaching aircraft, with incoming missiles, with death from above. But Quetzalcoatlus wasn't just producing noise. It was using sound as a hunting strategy. Dr. Chen's acoustic modeling suggests that pterosaur wing beats were designed to cause disorientation and panic in ground-dwelling prey animals. The low-frequency pulses would have caused immediate stress responses, muscle contractions, motor function disruption, involuntary defensive postures that made prey easier to target. Quetzalcoatlus was stunning its victims with sound before attacking from the air, a flying predator that weaponized its own flight acoustics. The implications for late Cretaceous terrestrial life are genuinely terrifying. Quetzalcoatlus could soar for hundreds of kilometers without landing, patrolling vast territories while producing acoustic signatures audible across entire ecosystems. For ground-dwelling animals, the sound of approaching wing beats meant immediate mortal danger. But unlike terrestrial predators, Quetzalcoatlus attacks came from above, from directions that most prey species couldn't adequately defend against. The wingbeat sound became associated with inescapable death, with predation that could strike from anywhere at any time. Dr. Chen tested the reconstructed Quetzalcoatlus wingbeat on modern bird populations. The results were immediate and consistent. Birds exposed to the sound exhibited immediate panic responses, disrupted flight patterns, abandonment of nesting sites. Some species refused to return to areas where the sound had been played for weeks afterward, as if the acoustic signature triggered deep evolutionary memories of aerial predators that could kill anything that flew. But the most disturbing aspect of the Quetzalcoatlus wingbeat isn't its effect on other animals. It's its effect on humans. When test subjects were exposed to the reconstructed sound, they reported immediate feelings of existential dread, overwhelming conviction that something enormous was approaching from above, irresistible urges to find cover, to hide, to make themselves as small as possible, even though they knew intellectually that the sound was a recording. Even though they knew that Quetzalcoatlus had been extinct for 66 million years. The frequency analysis explains why the wingbeat is so psychologically overwhelming. Human hearing evolved during periods when pterosaurs dominated the skies. For millions of years, the approach of large flying predators was announced by low-frequency wing pulses, sounds that meant immediate danger from above. sounds that required instant defensive responses. The acoustic signature of Quetzalcoatlus wingbeats became so deeply associated with aerial death that human nervous systems still recognize it, still respond with the same terror that kept our ancestors alive when the skies were full of flying killers. Modern military aircraft produce acoustic signatures similar to those of Quetzalcoatlus wingbeats. Low-frequency pulses, powerful acoustic footprints, sounds that can be heard long before the aircraft becomes visible. The psychological impact of incoming bombers, the terror of attack helicopters. These responses aren't just learned from warfare. They're evolutionary echoes of a time when death came from the sky regularly. When the sound of wingbeats meant you had seconds to find shelter or die. Dr. Chen discovered that the Quetzalcoatlus wingbeat contains acoustic elements that appear in modern sounds designed to cause fear and submission. Air raid sirens, military aircraft, emergency helicopters. Sound designers have been unconsciously recreating pterosaur wingbeat patterns for decades, because those frequencies tap into evolutionary fear responses that predate human civilization by tens of millions of years. When you hear sounds that make you want to run for cover, you're often hearing echoes of the Quetzalcoatlus wingbeat. Acoustic ghosts from an era when the sky itself was a threat. The Quetzalcoatlus wingbeat reconstruction remains classified by aerospace research institutions. Too dangerous for public release. Too likely to cause mass panic if broadcast in populated areas. Too potentially harmful to aviation if played near airports or flight paths. But the sound exists. A perfect acoustic reconstruction of the most terrifying predator approach signal in vertebrate evolutionary history. And according to everyone who has heard it, the Quetzalcoatlus wingbeat doesn't sound like an animal. It sounds like Judgment Day approaching. The Quetzalcoatlus wingbeat is a reminder that for most of vertebrate evolutionary history, the sky was full of death. Flying predators that could strike without warning. Flying predators that announced their approach with sounds that made the air itself dangerous. And somewhere in the deepest parts of your nervous system, you're still listening for those wingbeats, still ready to dive for cover when you hear them, still carrying the genetic memory of a world where looking up could be the last thing you ever did. In 2021, acoustic archaeologist Dr. Sarah Whitfield was exploring Chauvet Cave in southern France when she noticed something disturbing about the Paleolithic cave paintings. The images showed clear evidence of human occupation, but they also showed something else. Bears. Massive bears. And the humans and bears weren't depicted separately. They were sharing the same spaces. Dr. Whitfield realized she was looking at evidence of one of the most psychologically challenging coexistence scenarios in human prehistoric history. For thousands of years, humans and cave bears shared the same winter shelters. And during hibernation, cave bears produced sounds that would have driven modern humans insane. Cave bears were enormous. 50% larger than modern grizzlies. 1,500 pounds of muscle and bone designed for surviving Ice Age winters. But unlike modern bears, cave bears hibernated in large groups. Sometimes dozens of individuals packed into single cave systems. Dr. Whitfield's research revealed that hibernating cave bears didn't sleep silently. They produced continuous low-frequency vocalizations, breathing sounds, digestive noises, unconscious vocalizations that served as communication between hibernating individuals. A constant drone that filled cave systems for 6 months of every year. Using acoustic modeling software, Dr. Whitfield reconstructed the sound environment inside caves occupied by hibernating bear groups. The results were deeply disturbing. The hibernation drone reached volumes of 60 to 80 decibels, loud enough to prevent normal sleep, but more problematic was the frequency. The bear hibernation sounds contained powerful infrasonic components, frequencies that trigger anxiety, disorientation, and paranoia in humans. Frequencies that modern humans associate with haunted houses, with supernatural presences, with things that shouldn't exist. For Ice Age humans, finding adequate winter shelter was a matter of life and death. Caves provided protection from lethal cold, wind, and predators. But the best caves were often occupied by hibernating bear groups. This created an impossible choice: freeze to death outside, or share confined spaces with creatures that produced sounds designed to drive you insane. Many human groups chose the bears, because slow psychological degradation was better than immediate death. Dr. Whitfield tested the reconstructed cave bear hibernation drone on modern human subjects. The results were consistent and disturbing. After 2 hours of exposure, subjects reported severe anxiety, sleep disruption, auditory hallucinations, conviction that they were being watched, overwhelming urges to leave the testing area. Several subjects developed symptoms resembling PTSD, nightmares, hypervigilance, startle responses to unexpected sounds. The hibernation drone wasn't just annoying, it was psychologically toxic. But here's what makes the hibernation drone genuinely terrifying. Ice Age humans endured this acoustic torture for months at a time. Generation after generation, for thousands of winters, living in caves where the walls themselves seemed alive, where unconscious bears produced sounds that human brains interpreted as threats, where sleep became impossible, and waking became a nightmare. The psychological pressure would have been enormous. Constant stress, chronic sleep deprivation, persistent anxiety, all while trapped in confined spaces with predators that could wake up and kill everyone at any moment. The archaeological evidence supports the psychological impact theory. Human cave art from sites with evidence of bear hibernation shows consistent themes: distorted figures, supernatural beings, images that suggest psychological distress, as if months of exposure to hibernation drones caused hallucinations that humans then recorded on cave walls. Visual evidence of minds breaking down under acoustic pressure. Artistic records of humans losing their grip on reality while sharing shelter with bears. Dr. Whitfield believes that human responses to infrasonic frequencies may be partially rooted in genetic memories of cave bear hibernation drones. The instinctive fear that many people feel in certain enclosed spaces. The conviction that you're not alone when you objectively know you are. These responses may not be irrational. They may be evolutionary echoes of thousands of winters spent in caves where the walls made sounds that suggested the presence of enormous sleeping predators. But the most disturbing aspect of the hibernation drone research is what it reveals about human psychological adaptability. Ice Age humans survived the acoustic torture. They endured months of sleep deprivation, anxiety, and auditory hallucinations. They maintained social cohesion while living in environments that would drive modern humans to psychological breakdown within days. Either human psychology was more resilient in the past, or the alternative to sharing caves with bears was so lethal that psychological damage was acceptable. Either possibility suggests that prehistoric human life was far more psychologically challenging than anything modern humans have experienced. The cave bear hibernation drone remains in acoustic research archives. Too psychologically harmful for public release. Too likely to trigger anxiety disorders in sensitive individuals. Too potentially damaging to mental health if experienced for extended periods. But the sound exists. A perfect reconstruction of the acoustic environment that shaped human psychology for thousands of years. And according to everyone who has heard it, the hibernation drone sounds like being trapped, like being watched by something you can't see. like sharing space with death itself. The cave bear hibernation drone is a reminder that for thousands of years, human survival required enduring psychological torture, living with sounds that broke minds, sharing shelter with predators whose unconscious breathing could drive you insane. And somewhere in the deepest parts of your nervous system, you still remember those sounds, still feel the ancient claustrophobia when walls seem to breathe. Still know, without knowing why, that some spaces aren't safe, even when they're the only shelter you have. In 2020, carnivore biologist Dr. Michael Torres was studying modern wolf-pack communication when he received access to something unprecedented. Complete skulls from 12 dire wolves found together at the La Brea tar pits, a fossilized pack that had died simultaneously 14,000 years ago. Dr. Torres realized he had an opportunity to reconstruct not just individual dire wolf vocalizations, but coordinated pack howling, the acoustic signature of the most efficient predator group in Ice Age North America. What he discovered was that dire wolf packs weren't just hunting cooperatively. They were using coordinated vocalizations as psychological warfare. Sound as a weapon to break the will of prey animals before physical contact. Dire wolves were 25% larger than modern wolves. 180 pounds of muscle, bone, and teeth, specifically adapted for killing megafauna. Their skulls were built for maximum bite force. But Dr. Torres's acoustic reconstruction revealed they were also built for maximum acoustic output. Enlarged vocal chambers, reinforced throat structures, cranial features designed for producing extremely loud, sustained howls. Individual dire wolves could produce howls reaching 140 decibels, loud enough to cause hearing damage. But individual howls were only the beginning. When 12 pack members howled simultaneously, the acoustic interference patterns created something far more powerful. Dr. Torres used advanced acoustic modeling to recreate coordinated dire wolf pack howling. The results were genuinely terrifying. 12 dire wolves howling together could produce harmonic resonance patterns that reached calculated volumes of 200 decibels, louder than standing next to a rocket launch. But volume wasn't the most disturbing aspect. It was the psychological impact. The harmonic frequencies produced by coordinated dire wolf howling triggered immediate terror responses in mammalian nervous systems. Frequencies that evolution designed to cause panic, disorientation, and motor function failure. Pack howling as acoustic predation. When Dr. Torres tested the reconstructed pack howl on laboratory animals, the results were immediate and disturbing. Rabbits exposed to the sound experienced cardiac arrest. Deer froze completely, unable to move despite obvious distress. Even large mammals like horses showed signs of psychological breakdown. Trembling, muscle spasms, complete loss of defensive coordination. The dire wolf pack howl wasn't just communication. It was a sonic weapon designed to incapacitate prey through pure acoustic terror. No physical contact required. Just sound waves engineered by evolution to cause psychological collapse. The implications for Ice Age human survival are genuinely terrifying. Dire wolf packs were widespread across North America for over 200,000 years. During that time, their coordinated howling was a regular feature of the acoustic environment, especially at night, especially during winter, especially when prey animals were most vulnerable. Early humans would have heard dire wolf pack howls regularly. And every time they heard that sound, it meant a group of highly coordinated predators was announcing their presence. Predators that could kill anything they encountered. Predators that used sound to ensure their victims were too terrified to escape. Dr. Torres's research suggests that dire wolf pack howling was designed to trigger specific responses in human nervous systems. The frequency patterns match exactly with sounds that modern humans find most psychologically disturbing. Horror movie soundtracks, emergency sirens, sounds that trigger immediate fight-or-flight responses. But in the Ice Age, fight-or-flight responses to dire wolf howls were usually futile. The packs were too large, too coordinated, too efficient. The optimal response was to hide, to remain completely motionless until the pack moved on, to pray that the acoustic terror didn't give away your location. When Dr. Torres played the reconstructed pack howl for human test subjects, the reactions were consistent. Immediate panic attacks, overwhelming urges to hide, muscle paralysis. Several subjects reported vivid childhood memories of being afraid of the dark, as if the dire wolf howl activated genetic memories of nighttime terror, of lying motionless while predator voices filled the darkness outside, of knowing that movement meant death. The frequency analysis reveals why the pack howl is so psychologically devastating. Human hearing evolved in acoustic environments dominated by dire wolf vocalizations. For hundreds of thousands of years, coordinated predator howling was the most dangerous sound humans could hear. It meant that multiple killers were working together. It meant that escape was unlikely. It meant that survival depended on absolute silence and absolute stillness. The pack howl contains acoustic signatures that trigger the deepest levels of human survival psychology. Responses that bypass conscious thought. Responses that turn rational adults into terrified children hiding in the dark. Modern military and law enforcement organizations use acoustic weapons that produce frequency patterns similar to dire wolf pack howling. Crowd control devices, riot suppression tools, non-lethal weapons designed to cause disorientation and compliance. The psychological impact of coordinated group threats. The terror of being outnumbered by predators. These responses aren't learned from modern experience. They're evolutionary echoes of hundreds of thousands of years, when coordinated predator voices meant almost certain death. The dire wolf pack howl reconstruction remains classified by wildlife research institutions. Too psychologically dangerous for public release. Too likely to cause panic or trauma in large populations. Too potentially harmful to modern wolf conservation efforts if it increases fear of wild canids. But the sound exists. A perfect acoustic reconstruction of the most efficient group predator communication in mammalian history. And according to everyone who has heard it, the dire wolf pack howl doesn't sound like animals. It sounds like death calling your name. The dire wolf pack howl is a reminder that for most of human evolution, nighttime was filled with sounds that announced coordinated death. Predator voices that worked together. Predator voices that turned sound into psychological warfare. And somewhere in the deepest parts of your nervous system, you're still listening for those howls. Still ready to freeze when you hear them. Still carrying the genetic knowledge that some sounds mean you're being hunted. By things that hunt in groups. By things that use their voices to ensure you can't escape. In 2022, feline behavioral specialist Dr. Lisa Park was analyzing the skull structure of Smilodon fatalis when she made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about saber-tooth hunting behavior. The hyoid apparatus was enormous. Disproportionately large compared to any modern big cat. Saber-tooth cats weren't just apex predators. They were acoustic dominators. Animals that used vocalizations to control territory, intimidate rivals, and coordinate kills across vast distances. Dr. Park's reconstruction of saber-tooth territorial screams revealed sounds so psychologically overwhelming that they could clear entire landscapes of competing predators and prey animals. Vocalizations that functioned as biological weapons of mass destruction. Smilodon fatalis was built for killing. 400 pounds of muscle and bone, 7-inch canine teeth designed for puncturing vital organs. But Dr. Park's acoustic analysis revealed that physical violence was only part of their predatory strategy. The enlarged hyoid bones and specialized throat structures were designed for producing vocalizations at volumes and frequencies that no modern cat can achieve. When she fed the cranial measurements into acoustic modeling software, the results were disturbing. Saber-tooth territorial screams reached calculated volumes of 160 decibels. Loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage. Loud enough to be heard clearly at distances exceeding 25 kilometers. But volume wasn't the most terrifying aspect of the territorial scream. It was the psychological impact. The frequency pattern was specifically designed to trigger immediate terror responses in mammalian nervous systems. Sounds that bypass conscious thought and activate the deepest levels of survival psychology. When Dr. Park tested the reconstructed scream on modern animals, the results were immediate. Every species tested showed identical responses. Immediate flight behavior, abandonment of territory, complete cessation of normal activities. The saber-tooth scream was so psychologically overwhelming that it could clear entire ecosystems without physical confrontation. The implications for Pleistocene ecology are genuinely disturbing. Saber-tooth cats weren't just competing with other predators through violence. They were using acoustic intimidation to establish territories spanning hundreds of square kilometers. A single territorial scream could announce ownership of vast hunting grounds, could warn competing predators to stay away, could ensure that prey animals remained in a constant state of stress that made them easier to hunt. Acoustic territoriality, on a scale that has no modern equivalent. Dr. Park's research suggests that saber-tooth territorial behavior shaped the migration patterns and settlement choices of early human populations. Archaeological evidence shows that human sites are consistently located in areas where saber-tooth fossils are rare, not just because humans avoided dangerous predators, but because they couldn't psychologically tolerate living in areas where territorial screams were a regular feature of the acoustic environment. The screams were so psychologically disruptive that they made entire regions uninhabitable for human populations. When Dr. Park played the reconstructed territorial scream for human test subjects, the reactions were universal and disturbing. Immediate panic responses, overwhelming urges to flee, complete inability to concentrate on any other activity while the sound was playing. Several subjects reported that the scream felt like hearing pure aggression. Listening to something that wanted to kill everything. Being acoustically attacked by predation itself. The saber-tooth scream triggered responses so deep they seemed to come from outside conscious experience. The frequency analysis explains why the territorial scream is so psychologically devastating. The sound contains harmonic patterns that specifically target mammalian fear responses, frequencies that evolution associated with immediate mortal danger. With predators so large and dangerous that the only appropriate response was immediate flight. Saber-tooth cats had evolved vocalizations that functioned as acoustic dominance displays, sound weapons that could establish territorial control without physical confrontation, voices that turned entire landscapes into no-go zones for anything that could hear. But here's what makes the saber-tooth territorial scream genuinely terrifying for modern humans. Your ancestors heard these sounds regularly. For over 2.5 million years, saber-tooth cats were among the dominant predators wherever early humans lived. Their territorial screams were a constant feature of the prehistoric acoustic environment. Sounds that shaped human behavior, settlement patterns, and survival strategies for thousands of generations. The scream became so deeply associated with territorial danger that human nervous systems evolved specific responses to those frequency patterns. Responses that still exist in modern human neurology. Modern military forces use acoustic weapons that produce frequency patterns similar to saber-toothed territorial screams. Sound cannons. Psychological warfare devices. Non-lethal weapons designed to cause immediate flight responses. The acoustic signatures of absolute territorial dominance. The psychological impact of predator voices that announce ownership of space. These responses aren't learned from human conflict. They're evolutionary echoes of millions of years when territorial screams meant you were trespassing in the hunting grounds of something that could kill you instantly. Dr. Park discovered that the saber-toothed territorial scream contains acoustic elements that appear in modern sounds associated with extreme aggression. Riot control devices, emergency warning systems, sounds designed to cause immediate compliance through fear. But in the Pleistocene, those frequency patterns meant something far more specific. They meant you had entered territory claimed by a predator that used sound to announce its willingness to kill anything that challenged its dominance. Territory where the air itself carried warnings of death. The saber-toothed territorial scream reconstruction remains locked in paleoacoustic research files. Too psychologically dangerous for public release. Too likely to cause mass panic if broadcast in populated areas. Too potentially harmful to wildlife conservation efforts if it increases fear of large predators. But the sound exists. A perfect reconstruction of the most intimidating territorial display in mammalian evolutionary history. And according to everyone who has heard it, the saber-toothed territorial scream doesn't sound like an animal. It sounds like aggression given voice. Like territorial dominance made audible. Like the acoustic signature of something that owns death itself. The saber-toothed territorial scream is a reminder that for most of human evolution, the landscape was divided into acoustic territories. Regions where certain sounds meant you were trespassing. Regions where predator voices announced ownership of space. And somewhere in the deepest parts of your nervous system, you still recognize those territorial claims. Still feel the ancient urge to leave when you hear them. Still know, without knowing why, that some sounds mean you don't belong. In 2023, primatologist Dr. Elena Rodriguez received access to something that had never been studied acoustically. The complete skull of Gigantopithecus blacki, the largest primate ever to exist. 10 feet tall, 1,200 pounds. A creature so massive it could break trees with its bare hands. But Dr. Rodriguez wasn't studying Gigantopithecus for its size. She was studying it because of reports from paleontological sites across Southeast Asia. Reports of acoustic anomalies. Unexplained sounds recorded by research teams working in caves where Gigantopithecus remains are found. Sounds that shouldn't exist. Ania liberated from our own fear. Sounds that seem to come from the fossils themselves. Dr. Rodriguez used advanced cranial reconstruction software to model Gigantopithecus vocal tract anatomy. What she discovered was disturbing. The laryngeal apparatus was enormous. Vocal cords the size of guitar strings. Resonating chambers large enough to produce sounds at volumes and frequencies that would dwarf any modern primate vocalization. But when she attempted to reconstruct normal Gigantopithecus calls, the computer modeling failed. The anatomical structure wasn't designed for communication. It was designed for something else entirely. Something that became apparent when she modeled the vocalizations of a dying Gigantopithecus. Gigantopithecus went extinct approximately 300,000 years ago. Not gradually. Suddenly. Entire populations vanishing within a few thousand years. Dr. Rodriguez's acoustic reconstruction suggests that during their extinction event, dying Gigantopithecus produced death wails of extraordinary intensity. vocalizations reaching calculated volumes of 190 decibels, sounds that could be heard across entire continents, sounds that carried specific acoustic information about the dying process, about pain, terror, and extinction happening in real time. The reconstructed Gigantopithecus death whale contains frequency patterns that trigger profound existential anxiety in modern humans. Not just fear of predators, not just fear of violence, fear of ending, fear of species-level extinction, fear of being the last of your kind. When Dr. Rodriguez played the reconstructed death whale for test subjects, the responses were unlike anything documented in acoustic research. Subjects didn't just experience fear, they experienced existential despair. Overwhelming grief for something they had never known existed. Psychological responses that suggested the death whale contained information that transcended individual experience. But here's what makes the Gigantopithecus death whale genuinely terrifying. Modern humans were present during the Gigantopithecus extinction event. Early Homo sapiens populations in Southeast Asia would have heard these sounds, would have witnessed the acoustic signature of an entire species dying. For thousands of years, the landscape would have been filled with death wails, the voices of giants crying out as they faced extinction, sounds that announced the end of a lineage that had survived for millions of years. Sounds that carried information about mortality on scales that individual minds cannot process. Dr. Rodriguez believes that human responses to the death whale may be connected to genetic memories of witnessing species extinction. The profound sadness that many people feel when confronted with images of endangered animals. The existential anxiety triggered by stories of mass extinction. The deep, inexplicable grief that accompanies awareness of loss on geological timescales. These responses may not be learned from modern conservation education. They may be evolutionary echoes of thousands of years spent listening to the acoustic signatures of extinction happening in real time. The death whale research has attracted attention from organizations studying modern extinction events. The acoustic signatures of dying whale populations. The vocalizations of last breeding pairs in endangered bird species. The sounds that animals make when they sense their species is ending. Dr. Rodriguez's work suggests that extinction has its own acoustic signature, frequency patterns that announce ending, that carry information about mortality that transcends individual experience. That turned death into something larger and more terrifying than personal ending. When Dr. Rodriguez analyzed the specific frequencies in the Gigantopithecus death whale, she discovered something genuinely disturbing. The same acoustic patterns appear in modern sounds associated with global catastrophe, emergency broadcast systems, nuclear warning signals, sounds designed to announce threats to entire civilizations. As if human acoustic technology has unconsciously recreated elements of the extinction whale. As if we're still trying to process the acoustic signature of species death that our ancestors heard 300,000 years ago. But the most terrifying aspect of the death whale research is what it suggests about current extinction rates. If every dying species produces acoustic signatures that carry information about ending, then the modern world is filled with death wails that we can't consciously process. Sounds that announce extinction happening all around us. Sounds that trigger existential anxiety without our awareness. Sounds that carry the acoustic signature of the sixth mass extinction. Dr. Rodriguez believes that modern human anxiety about environmental collapse may be partially caused by unconscious processing of contemporary death whales. The sounds of species dying faster than they can be catalogued. The Gigantopithecus death whale reconstruction has been classified by multiple international research organizations, too psychologically dangerous for public release. too likely to cause existential crisis in large populations, too potentially destabilizing to social structures built on denial of extinction realities. But the sound exists. A perfect acoustic reconstruction of species death. The voice of extinction itself. And according to everyone who has heard it, the Gigantopithecus death wail doesn't sound like an animal dying. It sounds like the world ending. Like time itself crying out. Like the acoustic signature of everything that has ever been loved being lost forever. The Gigantopithecus death wail is a reminder that extinction has a voice. That species death produces sounds that carry information about ending on scales too large for individual comprehension. That somewhere in your nervous system, you're still listening for those sounds, still processing the acoustic signatures of loss that your ancestors heard when giants walked the earth, still carrying the genetic memory of what it sounds like when an entire way of being disappears forever. The death wail is still echoing, in the frequencies of modern anxiety, in the sounds of contemporary extinction, in the acoustic background of a world where species are dying faster than they can say goodbye. And whether you know it or not, you're still listening, still grieving, still carrying the sound of giants dying in the darkness. 10 prehistoric sounds, 10 different species, time periods, and acoustic weapons. 10 audio reconstructions that prove the prehistoric world was far more terrifying than any horror movie. But there's something else, something that connects them all, something that makes the pattern even more disturbing than the individual sounds. Your hearing evolved in this acoustic environment. Every frequency that terrifies you, every sound that triggers immediate panic, every acoustic pattern that makes your skin crawl. All of them are genetic echoes of sounds that could kill your ancestors, sounds that shaped human neurology for millions of years, sounds that carved fear responses so deep into human DNA that you still carry them, still respond to them, still run when you hear acoustic ghosts from a world where sound was a weapon. But here's what should keep you awake at night. These 10 sounds represent less than 1% of the prehistoric acoustic environment. For every extinct species that scientists have successfully reconstructed, there are thousands more whose voices will never be heard again. The predator calls that would drive you insane. Territorial displays that would clear entire cities. Death wails that would trigger psychological collapse in anyone who heard them. The prehistoric world wasn't just visually terrifying. It was acoustically lethal. A soundscape so dangerous that evolution had to redesign human hearing just to survive it. And the research is accelerating. Every year, new acoustic reconstruction technology allows scientists to recreate more prehistoric sounds. More predator calls, more territorial screams, more death wails. In laboratories around the world right now, researchers are playing sounds that no modern human should hear. Sounds that trigger responses so deep they seem to come from outside individual experience. Sounds that activate genetic memories of acoustic environments that vanished millions of years ago. Because the prehistoric sounds aren't really gone. They're still there, embedded in the acoustic patterns that modern humans find most disturbing, hidden in horror movie soundtracks. Echoing in emergency warning systems, preserved in the frequency signatures of sounds designed to cause fear, submission, and flight responses. Every time you hear something that makes you want to run, you're hearing acoustic archaeology. Evolutionary echoes of predator voices that once dominated the planet. The researchers who work with prehistoric sound reconstruction have noticed something disturbing. The longer they spend listening to extinct voices, the more their hearing changes. They become sensitive to acoustic patterns that other people can't detect. They start hearing prehistoric sounds in modern environments, as if exposure to ancient audio awakens dormant neurological pathways. as if the genetic memories of acoustic terror can be reactivated. Several acoustic paleontologists have had to stop their research due to psychological effects. Permanent changes in how they process sound. Permanent awareness of acoustic threats that no longer exist. Permanent listening for voices that have been silent for millions of years. But here's the truly disturbing possibility. What if the prehistoric sounds aren't as extinct as we think? What if some of them are still being produced by creatures we haven't discovered yet? Deep ocean species that evolved from prehistoric lineages. Cave-dwelling populations that survived mass extinctions. Creatures living in environments so remote that we've never encountered them. Recent deep-sea acoustic monitoring has detected sounds that don't match any known species. Calls that contain frequency patterns similar to reconstructed prehistoric vocalizations. Sounds that suggest some of the acoustic weapons that terrorized our ancestors may still be active. Still hunting, still calling, still waiting in the dark places where humans never go. The 10 sounds on this list represent what scientists have been willing to recreate and study. But there are other prehistoric sounds. Sounds so psychologically dangerous that research into them has been permanently discontinued. Sounds so acoustically lethal that even brief exposure causes lasting neurological damage. Sounds that governments have classified because playing them in populated areas would constitute acoustic warfare. The prehistoric world contained acoustic weapons so powerful they could collapse civilizations. And some of those weapons may still exist. In digital form, in research databases, in the acoustic memories of scientists who refuse to speak about what they've heard. Your nervous system is still listening for prehistoric sounds. Still ready to respond to acoustic threats that vanished millions of years ago. Still carrying genetic memories of voices that could kill with sound alone. Every unexplained moment of acoustic anxiety. Every sound that makes you feel watched. Every audio pattern that triggers inexplicable fear. All of them may be echoes of the prehistoric acoustic environment. Evolutionary whispers of a world where hearing the wrong sound meant